Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Today, we're going to be looking at processing employee expenses using Office 365. I'll go ahead and give it 1 minute. I think we're about a minute shy of top of the hour. It's going to be a quick webinar. We should get through it in probably, I don't know, just over 20 minutes if I had to give you a time there. But we'll give it 1 more minute just to make sure everyone has time to join. Thank you much. All right, I am showing top of the hour here, so we'll go ahead and get started. If you have any questions as I'm going through this, go ahead, feel free to use the question section there of the GoToWebinar or the chat. I'll do my best to monitor both of those and pause as I'm going through it. So feel free to shoot over any questions as I'm going through it. Again, today we're looking at processing employee expenses using Office 365. We will be featuring our EasyEXP365 product, which is sold as an Office 365 app. But even if you don't use our product, I hope today's session will be educational just because we'll show you some sort of cool tips that you could do just with Office 365. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I have a couple slides here and then we'll go right into a demo. Just a quick intro of who Dynamic Point is and what we do. So Dynamic Point, we create apps on top of the Office 365 framework. The best analogy that I have as far as what that means is it's very similar to developing apps for a mobile phone. You know, if any of us have ever, I'm sure we all have, installed apps on a mobile phone. When you do so and you add it from the store, it asks you questions, right? Can you use your camera or your notification services or your location and all the things that we just probably don't read and click yes to. We are doing that same thing, right? But we're not on an iPhone or an Android framework. We're on an Office 365 framework. We've been around a little longer than Office 365. We've been around since 2009, which dates back to BPOS, which was Office 365's predecessor, if any of you remember that. And we used to develop products on top of the SharePoint 2010 framework, and then through the years have migrated all of our products to Office 365. So that's a little bit about us and where we've been, just to sort of put it in perspective for you. Let's go ahead and keep moving here. As far as our product lineup, we have a portal application that allows the sharing of ERP or CRM data on an Office 365 extranet that you can share with your customers or vendors. We have an invoice automation app that automates the receipt, OCR, and workflow of invoices coming from accounts payable. We are, of course, not focused on either of these today. We're focused on this product right here, which is our Employee Expense Management. And like all of our products, it is an Office 365 app. So like I said, you know, a fair amount of today will just be looking at Office 365 functionality. And then as we get more into it, we'll show you what the app does in conjunction to the Office 365 features. And the scope of this is really employee expense reimbursement is the name of the game. So everything from capturing receipts to entering expenses, coding, the workflow, routing and approval, the accounting impact, and then ultimately the ERP integration of bringing this in as a transaction that can be posted and paid in your ERP system. So that's the ultimate goal of this, or the endpoint, I should say, is that you're going to bring that transaction in. It could be posted and paid in your ERP product. The sort of tools that we're using. So one thing to note, you know, all of these are Office 365 products. And for the most part, we're not selling you any of these, right? These all come with your Office 365 subscription. So what we are trying to do is leverage, of course, all of these because they make the solution and our product more powerful without having to build it all. And the general architecture of all of our products is obviously we're creating an app in this ecosystem. It's being added to SharePoint, and SharePoint is really the home base for this. It's the repository from where all the expenses are going. It's where your users are logging in. It's providing the security, the branding, the framework, the document management. It's really the foundation for this process and sort of the home base, if you will. Which SharePoint is also very tied in with Microsoft's workflow tool by the name of Power Automate. So of course, an expense report, most people want to route this for approval and get various people's input, whether they be managers, reviewers, accounts payable, etc., input on that, and we're going to use Power Automate to route that for review and approval. Power Apps comes up quite often with expense reports. It allows me to use my mobile phone to, of course, take a picture of these and maybe code them. So I will demo that today, how you could use the Power App to capture expenses and code them directly from your phone. Forms is a good one for just gathering additional detail. So if you want a simple expense form where people enter it, that is a convenient one. And then last but not least, all the reporting is coming from a Power BI side. So Power BI is our reporting tool of choice that allows us to hook into all this data that's being stored on your SharePoint site such that we could start creating some dashboards and analytics. Okay, let's make our way here to the demo. So one thing before we go into the demo is the process, right? From an employee expense perspective, there's really 3 major steps. One, I got to recapture these receipts, right? So we'll call this step 1 right here. And depending on my, I guess the type of employee I am or what my behavior is, if I'm traveling in the office, etc., will sort of impact how I want to capture these receipts. All of these are ultimately going into a library that we call a receipt library, but it's really just a SharePoint library that we've denoted as being sort of this incoming inbox for all employee receipts. But how they get there is, really up to them. They could upload it or drag and drop it. They could use a mobile app. They could email it to that library if that's their preference. We could just do a simple upload. I'll show you that. We could have a portal for them to do the entry. However they want to get that receipt in there is pretty flexible, just using Office 365 tools. And I think the more common one is these two, the mobile upload and the mobile app. Difference between the two being, one, I'm just sort of taking a picture of this receipt and then uploading it. And then the second one, I maybe want to do some coding and things like that as I'm on my phone. So that's the first step, right? Capturing of these receipts. The second step is, loosely what we call processing, which that entails bringing it in to our application where we start doing some coding associated to that. So we're going to put it to GL accounts and dimensions and other things as far as how we're going to denote where this expense is going. We could bring in such things as mileage and credit card items, etc. And we're going to use this Power Automate framework to route this for approval. So we're going to submit this task that's going to give us the ability to route it to different managers based on the configuration of our workflow such that they could review this report as it's going through the workflow. And then the third and final, again, we are bringing that into our ERP product, ready to be posted and paid. This one I'm going to highlight today. This webinar is not specific to any ERP product. We do integrate with several. So I won't focus that much on this just because I'm not talking about one of them. We do integrate with several, but ultimately the transaction is created in the ERP product. Okay, so let's start looking at this. I'll discard those. So here's our SharePoint site, and I've configured a pretty simple site. Just some calls to action here, and this is serving as my employees' dashboard for managing their expense reports. So I could obviously go into any of these calls to action. Most employees are going to hang out here in the expense processing one. But before we start, reviewing the transactions that we're creating, let's talk about the mobile capability, because that's usually where it starts. And as I mentioned on that previous slide, all of our expenses are going to come into this library. And a SharePoint library is a pretty flexible tool of how I want to get these receipts in here, right? I could obviously see drag and drop them. I got a big upload button here, so if I want to upload it, I can map it as a shared drive. I could, sync it with my local. I could do all of these things to get a document, aka an employee expense receipt, into this library. But for the sake of our demo, we want to start off with mobile upload. So I'm going to drag over my phone so everyone can see it. And we are going to start with this app right here, the OneDrive app. And what the OneDrive app gives us is the ability to interact with shared libraries, aka SharePoint libraries. So if I go to my expense site, this mobile expense receipt library is, sure enough, this one right here. And right now my folder is empty, just as you see on my desktop. And I want to go ahead and submit an expense receipt, right? So I want to capture this expense receipt and get it into this library. But I, of course, want to use my phone. So simple, right? OneDrive app, we didn't create any of this. This is just available in the App Store provided by Microsoft. I'm going to go ahead and click this little take a picture at the bottom. And sure enough, it brings up the camera. Here I have a sample receipt sitting on my desk in front of me, and we'll go ahead and take a picture of it. So voila, there's my receipt. As you can see, it's going to try to clean it up for me, and I could play with that a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and confirm it. And there's my receipt. So I have a sample receipt to Silver Greens, and I'm going to hit the done button. And it's just going to confirm that that's what I want to save, and click that as a confirmation. It's uploading. Voila, right? So now if I go over here really quick and hit refresh, I would hope to see I have that. Now note I have a bunch of columns here, right, with the vendor name, category, date, and everything else. Those are blank. This has been submitted to an OCR process, right? So in addition to uploading these receipts, we want to get some information off of them. We want to start, performing OCR and figuring out, the total, the date, the category, the vendor name, the description. I don't think I have mapped at this time, but the other fields, we want to start getting the information for these out of this attachment, right? Otherwise, it's just a PDF. There's really no data associated to it, or I should say true metadata, right? It's just a attachment at this point in time. So let's go ahead and hit refresh here. And voila, if everyone sees that, there's the results. Oop, I'm sorry, I did map the description. It's the meals and entertainment. I used the same as the category. There is the results of the OCR process, right? So, none of this is about our product at this point. This is just using Office 365. I took a picture from a mobile phone, and I submitted that to a receipts library and then performed OCR. And of course, from our product perspective, now we could start mapping these to GL accounts, and we have what we call an auto-create process in our application that's actually going to take this receipt and put it to an expense report line item. So we are going to sort of take this a little step further, take the results of this and auto-create a report for this employee. But nothing says that you need to do that, right? Now I have this receipt, it's associated to my employee, and I've been able to capture a fair amount of data associated to that expense receipt. So that's sort of method one, if you will. And to follow that guide through, if we go ahead and open up our expense report processing icon here, what we will see is, if all worked well, which usually does, an auto-created report, right? So I just created that report by nature of me uploading that. And if I go look at the details on this report, I would expect to see an expense item automatically created. So here's my Silver Greens. It's got my date, it's got meals and entertainment. And if I click on this, I would expect to see what I uploaded to my phone, right? So there's the Silver Greens receipt. The other thing that went on in the background is we used the data that was determined as the expense type, the cost center, and et cetera, to code these to accounts, right? So that's the sort of next step, if you will, is start coding these to general ledger accounts and accounting for what type of expense this is. But we took the results of OCR and did that automatically. All right, so I could continue to fill out this report, but before I go on with that, let's look at one other mobile method. And this is going to, again, use a standard Microsoft app, but we are going to use a Power App. And I have an expense report Power App. And by the way, this template is downloadable from Microsoft. So Microsoft provides you a fair amount of this out of the box. So what we are going to do here is create a new report and give it a title. Say we attended a trade show or something. We're going to select an approver and a cost center and create that report. So now I've created a report, and in actuality, what that has accomplished is it's actually creating this and saving this to a SharePoint list that's, again, serving as a repository for all this data. But we'll keep going here before we go look at that list. We'll go ahead and add a line item, and we'll do something like a team dinner. Go ahead and select the category. In this case, I'm not using OCR. Obviously I could, but I'm gonna go ahead and put a cost associated to it, say of like $8, and then attach that file. And again, take a picture of that receipt. So we'll go ahead and use that. Save it. And now I have a receipt that I could click the submit button and submit it again for a workflow. And as opposed to interacting with the library, this one interacted with SharePoint lists. So if I were to go to this list here and do a quick refresh, I would expect to see the details of that and the status of pending. In other words, been submitted for review. And we also have some line items associated to this as well. So there's a couple lists here in which all this information is being captured from this simple app that is deployed as a Power App. So of course, if I sort by the date here, I could start seeing all the items that were now associated to that report. So there's my team dinner, as well as the attachments. So this too can be used to add items automatically to an expense report. You know, the difference between the two processes is one was just a simple upload, and then this one was, you know, a little bit more involved in that I had the ability to code it as well after it was uploaded. So depending on whether or not, you know, you're doing things like tracking jobs and things that are probably not going to come out or not going to be determined by the receipt, and you want employees to submit that additional detail as you're uploading it, the Power App offers a little bit more functionality or flexibility as far as coding, as opposed to the upload method. Of course, I'm relying more on the results of OCR to extrapolate whatever type of data I need. So that's the primary difference between the two. Anyway, so let's keep going on, right? Like now I have this expense report, regardless of how these got in there, if they were coming from a Power App, if they were coming from an upload. And I've added an out-of-pocket expense item that we've already discussed, and now I could begin adding automobile items. These are, again, going to be for employees' reimbursement, and we have a configuration that associates a rate to whatever the distance is that's calculated here. So this is a Google Map integration. We'll say we traveled to Disneyland or something, and we'll calculate the distance associated to that. And in addition to calculating the distance, if I hit OK here, it's going to add it to my report and specify my reimbursement amount for those mileage using the configuration in the system. I'll go ahead and complete the coding and put in a different cost center there and complete that and hit add. So now I have a auto item, I have an expense item. Let's go ahead and look at this expense item one more time. I could fill in some more details, obviously, if I want to. The rest were automatically added from my phone. Here we have a business reason. This is actually an example of a user-defined field. And to illustrate, if I were to pick a different expense type, you could see it goes away. But for meals and entertainment, I have this requirement that I want people to put what the reason or the business justification is for the expense. So I could put something like team building. And in this case, I'm actually recognizing the tax. For us who live in the US, tax is probably not that interesting because it all goes in as an expense. For those that live in Canada, there is separate tax treatment for those amounts. So we do distinguish between what is the untaxed as well as the taxed amount. So there's a difference there. And we'll go ahead and add that item. And then last but not least, you see this ability to process credit card transactions. Credit card transactions are items that have come in from a corporate credit card. So we have a feed with corporate credit card providers, and I could add these directly to my report. Now, usually the big difference between the credit card items is we're not going to reimburse the employee for them. So if I go in here and I code this, we'll notice that there's going to be a difference in how this gets treated from a reimbursement perspective. So let's go ahead and put lodging or hotel, that's good. And we'll save it. And after that saves, if I go look at my totals here, you can see I have a report total and I have a credit card total, and the reimbursement does not include the credit card amount. In other words, I'm not paying the employee for the credit card. It is in fact going to make a different type of transaction in the system to either account for that expense or to have a payable to the credit card vendor, depending on how you're managing those in your ERP product. So good enough on the report here. I have expense items, I have auto items, I got credit items, etc. Let's go ahead and save it. And then you can see it's in this not submitted status. Let's go ahead and kick this off for workflow. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the submit button. And you're going to watch this report disappear. And it's not really gone, of course. It's just being filtered out because it's now under review. But if I clear that, I can see here's my auto-created report. And if I look at this audit log associated to it, I could see it's now pending a review by my manager, which happens to be a Dynamic Point demo account. So if I were pretending to be that manager, and I would go in here and look at my email, I could see I have a new report that's ready for my review. Now, as you can see, this is using Power Automate for a review perspective, right? And if you're familiar with Power Automate review tasks, I could actually review this from Teams. I could do it from my mobile phone. I could do it from email. There's a web page. Really, however you want to manage these is up to you. But I'll go ahead and open this task. And then again, I'm pretending to be a manager here. And I've included some details on the report, but chances are I'm going to want to click this link and look at the real, form and what's included, and maybe go into the attachments, etc. Now, a reviewer may, depending on your configuration, have the ability to edit the report as it's going through the review process as well. So you see, I do not have an edit button, but in some of our configurations will allow the reviewer to edit it as it's going through the review process as well. So I'm going to say this looks good. And complete that task. Now, what this does is moves it forward in the workflow. And for the sake of getting through this in a very timely manner, I only have one approval step. So it's pretty simple. So if I go back to my dashboard, and I'm going to have to hit refresh here. And what I should see if I go look at my, it's no longer going to be under review. It's going to be in this new status called approved complete. And what you'll see here is I now have a completed report that has captured the reviewer notes. So that's what the reviewer entered. And of course, if it went through additional reviews, they would be there as well. And the audit log has every step in that workflow. So I could see it went under review. It was reviewed by the Dynamic Point Demo account and they approved it. And the last but not least one is these ERP details that'll show me the details of the ERP transaction that it created. So this happened to go into Microsoft Dynamics. We have integration with a lot of the products, but this one, you can see the transaction as well as the state of the transaction. And this one, as you can see, it's processing, which means it has not been paid yet. But as it is paid, we will show the either check number or the ACH number of the payment in that screen. So that was the end of that process. So we're wrapping this up. Let's go ahead and bring back our slides and just end with this and say if you have any questions or you want to contact us, there's a schedule a demo link on our website and phone number as well as our email. And one other thing I'll show you on the website that's sort of cool, if you want to try out the OCR process, if you go to our website, I thought I had it open, yep. And you go to our expense management product and you scroll down all the way to the questions and answers. You'll see how well does OCR work. And in this, you'll have a link where you could upload your own receipts. And like I said, this is not required to have our product to integrate OCR with a SharePoint document library. So you could upload yours and try that. And even that by itself provides a lot of value. Just from the sake of capturing expense receipts and being able to extrapolate key information for them. So that was all I had for today. Thank you everyone for joining and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.